It started with a cough, just a small tickly thing I barely noticed, the kind you clear with a discreet half swallow and forget about. Mark, my husband of 6 years, the man whose laugh once felt like sunshine, the man I'd believed could navigate us through any storm, didn't even look up from his laptop, glowing with lines of code. That silence, that lack of a simple, "You okay, love?" should have been a screeching alarm, a blaring siren in the quiet comfort of our shared life. But you don't see the cracks forming in the foundation until the floorboards start to groan under your feet, until the whole damn house of your existence begins to shake. And believe me, by the time he uttered those 5 soul-crushingly unbelievable words, "You don't deserve rest," the shaking had become a full-blown earthquake, threatening to swallow me whole. I'm a nurse, not just any nurse, but a pediatric oncology nurse. My days are a relentless ballet of beeping machines, hushed parental whispers, the metallic tang of antiseptic, and the impossibly brave smiles of children fighting battles no child should ever face. I pour every ounce of my being into those little souls, celebrate their tiny victories with a fierceness that surprises even myself, and grieve their losses in the quiet, stolen moments in the staff bathroom, tears mingling with the harsh soap. I come home hollowed out, not just a physical exhaustion that makes my limbs feel like lead, but an emotional depletion so profound it feels like my very spirit has been scraped raw. Mark knew this. He used to know this. He used to be the safe harbor, the one who'd draw me a bath with lavender salts, who'd have my favorite comfort food waiting, his arms a refuge where I could crumble and let the day's sorrow wash away without judgment. He was my anchor, or so I thought. The cough, initially a minor inconvenience, dug its heels in. It grew bolder, raspier, a constant, unwelcome companion. After a particularly brutal week, 2 code blues back to back, one devastating conversation with parents about palliative care, and enough overtime to make my eyes cross, I dragged my weary body home on a Friday night. I felt like a shadow of myself, a frayed nerve ending desperately seeking solace. All I craved was the oblivion of my bed, a cocoon of pillows, and hours upon hours of uninterrupted sleep. "Hey," I managed, my voice a scratchy parody of itself. My work bag thudded by the door, the sound disproportionately loud in the apartment's strange, expectant hush. Mark was on the couch, his face illuminated by the violent, flickering lights of whatever digital battlefield he was conquering. He grunted, a monosyllabic dismissal that could have meant anything, but felt chillingly like, "Don't disturb my focus." "Brutal week," I mumbled, my feet shuffling towards the kitchen, desperate for water to soothe my parched throat. "I think I'm really coming down with something. My chest feels tight. I might just sleep the entire weekend away." He paused. His game. The sudden, absolute silence that descended was more alarming than the noise. He turned, his face a mask in the dim, shifting light from the screen. "Sleep?" he said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth, any concern. "You haven't finished the laundry piling up in the basket, or meal prepped our lunches for next week, and the guest bathroom grout looks disgusting." I just stared at him, a cold, heavy dread unfurling in my stomach, coiling like a snake. "Mark, I can barely stand upright. I feel genuinely awful. My body is screaming at me. Can't those things possibly wait?" "Why should they wait?" he asked, and now his voice had a sharp, unfamiliar edge, like a razor blade hidden in velvet. "You think because you're feeling a bit under the weather, your responsibilities just magically disappear into thin air, Sarah." The casual dismissal, the air quotes around "under the weather," stung more than I could have anticipated. "A bit under the weather?" I repeated, my own voice rising, fueled by a sudden surge of indignant disbelief despite the crushing fatigue. "Mark, I work 60-plus-hour weeks, trying to keep children alive. Children who are suffering. I am sick. My body is failing me. I need to rest." And that's when he delivered the line, the 5 words that would become the chilling refrain of my nightmare. His eyes, those familiar brown eyes that had once looked at me with such adoration, were now cold, hard, like polished stones. You don't deserve rest, Sarah. Not until your work here, in this house, is done. I wish I could tell you I unleashed a torrent of righteous anger, that I threw the nearest heavy object, that I screamed until my throat was raw, or packed a bag and stormed out into the night, leaving him to his cold pronouncements and flickering screens. But the truth is, I was too profoundly stunned, too physically and emotionally depleted. His words struck me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs, leaving me gasping and reeling. What? What did you just say to me? I whispered, the question barely audible. You heard me, he said, his attention already drifting back to his game, as if he'd merely commented on a dull TV commercial. There's a list on the fridge. I expect it to be completed before you even think about indulging in resting. The list. Oh God, the list. It was, of course, preposterously long, a monument to his newfound tyranny. Every conceivable household chore was on it, plus a few I was certain he'd conjured from the depths of some perverse need to dominate. Clean the oven until it gleamed like new. Organize the spice rack not just neatly, but alphabetically by country of origin. Polish, the antique silver tea. Set we hadn't used since our wedding. Defrost and sanitize the entire freezer. It wasn't a to-do list. It was a declaration of war, meticulously disguised as domestic responsibility. That weekend became a feverish, hallucinatory blur of frantic activity and actual raging fever. My cough deepened, each hack a painful explosion in my chest. Every muscle screamed in protest. But his cruel words, "You don't deserve rest," became a relentless, internal drill sergeant. I scrubbed, I cooked, I organized, I laundered, fueled by a bizarre, toxic cocktail of fury, profound disbelief, and a desperate, pathetic yearning to somehow prove him wrong. To prove, maybe, even just to myself, that I did deserve it. By Sunday night, my body shaking uncontrollably from a combination of exhaustion and illness, I had, somehow, checked off every single item. I collapsed into bed, the sheets feeling like sandpaper against my feverish skin, and slept for a fitful, nightmare-ridden hour before my alarm. That merciless shriek tore me from unconsciousness for another grueling hospital shift. Mark offered no word of thanks. Not a flicker of acknowledgement for the Herculean effort I'd expended while visibly ill. His only comment? The chicken in his meticulously prepped lunchboxes was, apparently, a little on the dry side. That was it. The world tilted a little more on its axis that morning. The "you don't deserve rest" mantra wasn't a one-off, a cruel slip of the tongue in a moment of stress. It became his new preferred weapon. And its application spread insidiously, like a cancer, beyond household chores. It began to suffocate every tiny pocket of potential joy or respite in my life. If I dared to pick up a novel after a soul-crushing day, hoping to lose myself in another world for an hour, shouldn't you be researching more lucrative investment opportunities for us, Sarah? Time is money. If I tentatively suggested a quiet night in, maybe watching a movie, snuggled on the couch, like we used to. There's that online course on advanced data analytics you mentioned you were interested in. Productive people don't vegetate in front of screens, they invest in themselves. If I dared to whisper, I'm so tired. Tired is a mindset, Sarah, a weakness. Push through it. Successful people don't make excuses, they make progress. He'd always been ambitious, driven to succeed. I'd once found that quality deeply attractive, a sign of his passion and intellect. He was a gifted software developer, undeniably smart, relentlessly dedicated to his craft. But somewhere along the winding road of our life together, his ambition had curdled, mutated into something grotesque and demanding, something that required not just his own relentless, joyless productivity, but mine as well. And it became painfully clear that my job, the one that involved literal life and death, the one that consumed my heart and soul, wasn't productive enough in his newly calibrated worldview. It didn't generate passive income. It didn't scale according to his spreadsheets. It was, in his eyes, a drain, not an asset. My friends at the hospital, my second family, began to notice the shadows under my eyes, the way my scrubs hung a little looser each week, the persistent, rattling cough I couldn't shake. "Sarah, you look like a ghost," my closest colleague, Emily, said one afternoon in the break room, her usually cheerful face etched with genuine concern. She placed a comforting hand on my arm. "Are you okay? Is everything all right at home? You can talk to me, you know." Oh, how I yearned to confide in her, to pour out the whole bizarre, terrifying story, to ask her if I was going mad, if this was truly happening. But a leaden cloak of shame held me captive. How could I possibly admit that my husband, the man I had promised to love and cherish, was treating me like some kind of Victorian-era scullery maid, a possession to be optimized? That he had somehow managed to convince me, on some deep, insidious level I couldn't quite understand, that my utter exhaustion was a moral failing, a character flaw? So I just forced a weak, brittle smile. "Just a bit run down, Em. You know how these long shifts can be. Nothing a good night's sleep won't fix, eventually." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. The surprises, the subtle shifts in his cruelty, kept coming, each one a fresh, stinging paper cut on my already wounded spirit. One evening I came home, my feet aching, my spirit craving the familiar comfort of my beloved novels, the worn pages a portal to escape. I walked to the bookshelf, and my blood ran cold. They were gone, all of them. My carefully curated collection, each book a memory, a friend. In their place stood a regimented line of self-help books, titles screaming at me: The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Think and Grow Rich, Atomic Habits, Unleash the Power Within. "Mark," I began, my voice trembling, a tremor starting deep within me. Where are my books?" "I donated them," he announced calmly, his eyes still glued to his monitor, as if discussing the weather. "They were just collecting dust, emotional clutter. These titles are much more beneficial for your ongoing personal development and our shared goals." A rage so potent, so visceral, surged through me that for a moment I thought I might actually explode. "You had no right," I cried, the words tearing from my throat. "Those were my books. They meant something to me. I have every right to ensure this household and its occupants are geared towards maximum efficiency and forward momentum, Sarah," he retorted, his voice still infuriatingly level. "Your sentimental attachment to escapist fiction was a hindrance, holding you back from your true potential. It wasn't just about productivity anymore, was it?" A horrifying realization began to dawn. This was about erasure. He was systematically, methodically stripping away every little thing that brought me solace, every piece of my identity that didn't align with his new, terrifying vision of who I should be, and replacing it with his own cold, utilitarian blueprint. My soul felt like it was being slowly suffocated. The breaking point, or at least what I naively believed would be the breaking point, arrived a few agonizing months later. The dizzy spells I'd been experiencing for weeks had become more frequent, my vision sometimes tunneling as if I were about to faint. My cough was now a permanent, unwelcome resident in my lungs, and I was losing weight at a rate that even my loose scrubs couldn't hide anymore. With a surge of desperate resolve, I finally made a doctor's appointment during my lunch break, terrified of what I might hear, but more terrified of continuing this way. The diagnosis was stark: walking pneumonia, complicated by severe adrenal burnout. "Sarah," Dr. Chen said, her voice gentle but firm, her eyes filled with a profound concern that almost made me weep with relief at being seen, truly seen. "You are incredibly unwell. You need to take a significant amount of time off work. I'm talking at least 2 weeks, possibly longer. And when I say rest, I mean complete rest. No stress, no chores, no strenuous activity of any kind. Your body is screaming at you, and if you don't listen now, the consequences could be very serious." Her prescription for complete rest felt like a cruel, cosmic joke. How could I possibly rest when I, according to my own husband, didn't deserve it? But the doctor's authoritative words, the undeniable clinical diagnosis, lent me a fragile sliver of courage. That evening, armed with the official doctor's note, I confronted Mark. My hands were shaking as I handed it to him. He glanced at the paper, a sneer instantly twisting his lips. Pneumonia? Burnout? He practically spat the words. Sounds like fancy medical jargon for laziness to me, Sarah. 2 weeks off? And who, pray tell, is going to pay the bills while you're resting? Who's going to manage this household, which seems to fall apart if you're not constantly micromanaged? The injustice of it, the sheer cruelty, stole my breath. Mark, I am seriously ill, I pleaded, my voice cracking. The doctor said it's critical I rest. My lungs. Doctors get kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies for overprescribing rest and unnecessary medications, he scoffed, waving his hand dismissively as if swatting away an annoying fly. It's a well-known racket. You don't need coddling, you just need to be stronger. Develop some grit. Push through it. He then had the audacity to present me with a new, even more demanding list of household optimizations and personal development tasks he expected me to complete during my so-called sick leave. It included things like repainting the entire guest room, a productive use of your downtime, and mastering the fundamentals of stock trading through an online course he'd bookmarked. I stared at him, a horrifying, chilling clarity dawning in the recesses of my exhausted mind. This wasn't just about a warped obsession with ambition or a misguided attempt to improve me. This was calculated cruelty. This was emotional abuse, plain and simple. The man I had loved, the man I had built a life with was gone, utterly erased, replaced by this cold, calculating, tyrannical stranger who wore his face. My heart shattered into a million pieces. That night, the thought of sharing a bed with him was unbearable. I curled up on the too-short couch, the doctor's note clutched in my fist like a useless talisman, his callous words echoing in the suffocating silence of the apartment, each syllable a fresh stab to my already bleeding heart. A wave of despair so profound it felt like drowning washed over me. Was this truly my life now? An endless, joyless cycle of back-breaking work at the hospital, thankless chores at home, and his relentless, soul-destroying disapproval? Was there no escape? The next morning, my eyes gritty from lack of sleep and unshed tears, I called Emily. I couldn't bear the weight of it alone a moment longer. The story, the whole unbelievable, insane saga tumbled out of me. A torrent of disbelief, searing hurt, profound confusion, and bone-deep exhaustion. She listened, her horrified gasps and soft murmurs of support punctuating my choked narrative. The simple act of speaking the truth aloud, of having someone believe me without question, felt like a lifeline thrown into a raging sea. Sarah, oh my God, Sarah, this is beyond awful, she said when I finally fell silent, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and concern. This isn't just him being a demanding jerk. This is coercive control. This is abuse, Sarah. You are not safe there. You need to get out of there. Now. Her words, so direct, so unequivocal, sliced through the thick fog of my confusion, my shame, and my carefully constructed denial. Get out. It sounded so deceptively simple, yet the logistics, the implications, felt terrifyingly complex. Where would I go? How would I manage? We'd built a life together. Our finances were hopelessly intertwined. Our social circles overlapped. The thought of disentangling myself felt overwhelming. But the alternative, staying, enduring this slow erosion of my sanity and health, was rapidly becoming unthinkable. He was killing my spirit, day by painstaking day. Mark's behavior predictably escalated. He seemed to sense my internal shift, my dawning awareness, and he tightened his grip. He started monitoring my phone with unnerving intensity, questioning every call to Emily, demanding to know the content of our conversations. He began setting timers for the tasks he'd assigned me, like I was some kind of factory worker on an assembly line. If I was a few minutes late finishing the dishes because a coughing fit had doubled me over, I'd be subjected to a lengthy, patronizing lecture on time management, efficiency, and the importance of respecting his schedule. He even started critiquing my professional performance at the hospital, based on half-baked articles he'd researched online. Are you absolutely certain you're employing the most up-to-date, evidence-based protocols for pediatric sepsis, Sarah? I read an interesting meta-analysis that suggested he possessed not a shred of medical background, not an iota of understanding of the complexities I navigated daily. He just had an internet connection and an unshakable, terrifying belief in his own absolute superiority in all matters. The true, horrifying surprise, the one that finally irrevocably shattered the last vestiges of my denial and propelled me toward action, came a week after my pneumonia diagnosis. I was, of course, supposed to be resting, recuperating. Instead, I was on my hands and knees, scrubbing the kitchen floor with a worn-out brush, each movement sending a jolt of pain through my aching back, my breath wheezing in my tight chest. Mark was supervising from the kitchen table, a complex spreadsheet detailing our household efficiency metrics glowing on his laptop screen. He was humming softly, a self-satisfied tune. My phone, which I'd foolishly left on the counter, buzzed. It was a message from my younger sister, Jess. Before I could even think to react, Mark's hand shot out, snatching it with predatory speed. His face, already set in lines of smug authority, darkened ominously as he read the message. "So," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low, menacing growl, "you're planning to leave me, plotting behind my back." My heart leaped into my throat, hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The message from Jess was utterly innocuous. Something about confirming dates for a family dinner the following month. But then, a cold wave of terror washed over me. The previous night, consumed by despair and a desperate, flickering hope, I had drafted a long, rambling email to Jess. In it, I'd poured out everything, the whole sordid, unbelievable story, begging for her help, asking if I could possibly stay with her for a while if I found the courage to leave. I'd saved it in my drafts folder, too terrified, too paralyzed by indecision to actually hit send. He must have gone through my drafts. He must have been spying on me, violating my privacy in ways I hadn't even imagined. "You think you can just pack your bags and walk away?" he snarled, pushing himself up from the table, his large frame looming over me, casting a chilling shadow. "After everything I've invested in you? After all the effort I've put into trying to make you better, more efficient, more worthwhile? Invested in me?" I choked out, scrambling clumsily to my feet, the scrub brush clattering to the floor. "Mark, you're not investing in me. You're destroying me. I'm sick. I'm utterly miserable. And it's because of you, because of this obsession." "You're weak," he spat, his face contorted with a mixture of contempt and fury. "You can't handle a little constructive pressure, a little guidance towards self-improvement. I was trying to mold you into someone strong, someone resilient, someone who deserves success, someone who deserves me." And then, with a chilling glint in his eyes, he delivered the final, unbelievable demand, the one that laid bare the true horrifying depth of his delusion and his determination to control every facet of my existence. "You're not going anywhere, Sarah," he said, his voice a low, possessive whisper that sent shivers of pure ice down my spine. "And to ensure your continued commitment to our future, I've taken a few necessary precautions." He gestured dismissively towards his ever-present laptop. "I've been tracking our finances with meticulous detail, as you know. All our joint accounts, the savings we've built together over years. I've consolidated the majority of the funds into a new, secure account. In my name only, of course. It's for our future, naturally, but access, shall we say, requires a certain level of proven dedication and loyalty from you." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the enormity of his betrayal. He had financially crippled me, effectively cutting off any means of escape. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "And your precious nursing license," he continued, a smug, triumphant smile playing on his lips, enjoying my visible shock. "I happened to be looking into the renewal process recently. It's quite a stringent procedure, as I'm sure you appreciate. One anonymous, well-placed complaint about professional misconduct or serious negligence, perhaps from a genuinely concerned husband, worried about his wife's burnout and pneumonia, affecting her job performance and patient safety. Well, that could tie things up for a very, very long time, make it exceptionally difficult for you to work anywhere. He was threatening my career, my vocation, my very identity, my ability to care for those vulnerable children, the one part of my life that still held profound meaning and purpose. This wasn't about me not deserving rest. This was about him ensuring I could never, ever leave him. This was about absolute, unadulterated, tyrannical control. He wanted to own me. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach, but alongside it, a different emotion surged, a cold, clear, incandescent rage. The fight or flight response, so long suppressed by crushing exhaustion and creeping fear, finally, definitively kicked in. But it wasn't a wild, panicked, headless flight. It was a sudden, chilling clarity. I had to be smart. I had to be strategic. I had to beat him at his own game. "Okay, Mark," I said, my voice astonishingly calm, a detached coolness I didn't know I possessed settling over me. "Okay, you're right. I see that now. I've been emotional, unreasonable, overly sensitive. Let me let me just process all of this. I need to finish the floor. We need a clean environment for optimal thinking." He looked visibly surprised by my sudden, complete capitulation, but a flicker of arrogant triumph quickly replaced it, smoothing his features. "Good. Excellent," he said, nodding slowly. "I knew you'd eventually see reason. Efficiency and logic always prevail over sentimentality, Sarah." He sat back down at the table, returning to his glowing spreadsheet, a benevolent king back on his throne, his errant subject brought to heel. My mind, however, was no longer foggy with illness or despair. It was racing, crystal clear, sharp as a shard of glass. He'd made a colossal mistake. In his unbridled arrogance, he'd shown his entire hand, revealed the full extent of his manipulative arsenal. He thought he'd won. He thought I was completely broken, utterly cowed. He didn't realize he'd just handed me the very key to my escape. His monumental, all-consuming, blinding arrogance. He underestimated me. Over the next few excruciatingly long days, I played the part of the dutiful, reformed wife. I became a veritable model of hyper-efficiency. I completed his increasingly ridiculous lists with a new, almost manic, focused energy. I listened to his endless lectures on productivity, on financial planning, on optimizing our life partnership with feigned, wide-eyed attentiveness, even asking clarifying questions. I even, to his immense satisfaction, asked him to mentor me in the basics of stock trading, which puffed up his already dangerously inflated ego to an almost comical degree. "You see, Sarah," he'd say, patting my head in a condescending gesture that made my skin crawl, "you're finally starting to think strategically. There's hope for you yet." Inside, however, I was a whirlwind of clandestine activity. Every spare moment, every lunch break at the hospital, was spent on their computers, meticulously researching divorce lawyers specializing in coercive control, seeking out shelters for abused women, and desperately looking into ways to preemptively protect my nursing license. Emily was my rock, my lifeline, my co-conspirator in this terrifyingly high-stakes operation. She helped me discreetly gather essential documents: my passport, my social security card, copies of our old joint bank statements from before he'd systematically drained them, my original nursing degree and license certificates. I managed to open a new secret bank account at a completely different bank. Slowly, painstakingly, siphoning off tiny amounts of cash, I managed to skim from grocery overages he wouldn't notice, or by selling a few old textbooks online that he hadn't bothered to donate in his purge of my intellectual life. Each dollar felt like a small act of rebellion, a step closer to freedom. The hardest part was the constant performance, feigning continued illness to justify my presence at home, while simultaneously being hyper-productive to keep him placated and unsuspecting. My pneumonia was undeniably real, the exhaustion a bone-deep ache that never truly left me. But I pushed through, fueled by a potent cocktail of adrenaline, righteous anger, and the burning, desperate hope of liberation. Mark, in his profound self congratulatory blindness, simply interpreted my manic energy as irrefutable proof that his twisted methods worked. See, Sarah, he'd crow. You just needed to apply yourself correctly. You're already so much more resilient and focused. I'm proud of the progress you're making under my guidance. The irony was almost too much to bear. The day I chose to leave was a Tuesday. Mark had a high stakes, game changing virtual meeting scheduled for most of the afternoon with a potential new major client for his burgeoning freelance software development business, one he'd been boasting about incessantly for weeks, detailing how it would catapult him to a new level of success. He'd be sequestered in his home office, completely absorbed, for at least 3 hours. It was the perfect window. That morning, I made him his absolute favorite breakfast: blueberry pancakes with crispy bacon and fresh orange juice. I laid out his best suit, freshly pressed. I listened with rapt attention as he strategized aloud about his upcoming meeting, even offering a few suggestions that he called surprisingly insightful. You're finally starting to think strategically, Sarah, about the bigger picture, he'd said, giving my head another one of those infuriatingly condescending pats. It's good to see. As soon as his office door clicked shut and I heard the low, confident drone of his voice commencing the meeting, I moved. Every nerve in my body thrummed with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Emily, bless her loyal heart, had arranged for a trusted friend with a nondescript van to be parked a block away, out of sight of our apartment windows, at precisely 1 p.m. I had just under 2 hours. I didn't take much. A pre-packed duffel bag, hidden deep in my side of the closet for weeks, containing a few changes of clothes, my vital documents, the small precious bundle of cash I'd managed to squirrel away, and a cheap burner phone Emily had insisted I take. But I took one more thing, one crucial thing: Mark's main external hard drive, the one where he religiously, obsessively backed up all his brilliant software projects, his meticulous financial records, and most importantly, detailed logs of all his financial transactions, including the systematic movement of our joint funds into his sole account. He was so paranoid about digital data loss, yet so breathtakingly arrogant, he'd never in a million years imagined me, his inefficient, sentimental wife, having the nerve or the know-how to touch it. Walking out of that apartment, the place that had transformed from a loving home into a gilded cage, then into an outright prison, felt like taking my first true breath after nearly drowning for months. The sunlight on the street felt warmer, the air cleaner, the sounds of the city less jarring, more vibrant. It was as if a heavy, oppressive filter had been lifted from the world. Emily's friend, a kind-faced woman named Maria, was there, exactly as promised. We quickly and quietly loaded my meager belongings. As Maria pulled the van away from the curb, I allowed myself one fleeting glance back at the building, not at our window, but at the structure itself, a monument to a life I was leaving behind, a life I had fought to survive. Then I turned my face forward, towards the unknown, towards freedom. The aftermath was tumultuous, to put it mildly. Mark, as I had fully anticipated, exploded. When he eventually emerged from his meeting, flushed with perceived success, and discovered I was gone, along with his precious, irreplaceable hard drive, his rage was apparently of biblical proportions. He called my old phone, which I'd deliberately left on the kitchen counter, wiped clean of all data, hundreds of times. He bombarded my family, my friends, even the hospital administration with frantic, then angry, then pleading calls. He attempted to file a missing persons report, portraying himself as the distraught, worried husband. But Emily, accompanied by a sharp, no-nonsense lawyer I'd consulted with during my secret preparations, calmly and methodically explained the situation to the police, presenting them with copies of my doctor's notes detailing the pneumonia and burnout, and a carefully written, notarized statement I'd prepared outlining Mark's coercive control and the reasons for my departure. They quickly saw it for what it was: a domestic dispute, a woman escaping an abusive situation, not an abduction. His vile threat against my nursing license was his first real, calculated act of revenge. An anonymous complaint was indeed filed with the state nursing board, citing severe emotional instability, negligence due to burnout, and unprofessional conduct. It was a terrifying, gut-wrenching period. For weeks, my career, my passion, the very core of my professional identity, hung precariously in the balance. The thought of not being able to care for my patients, of having that stolen from me, was almost unbearable. But I and Emily and my lawyer had prepared for this. I had Dr. Chen's unequivocal medical testimony. I had years of glowing performance reviews and letters of commendation from my superiors and patient families. I had my own meticulously documented account of Mark's escalating campaign of coercive control, backed up by Emily's corroborating statement and evidence of his harassment. The nursing board conducted a thorough, and I must say, fair investigation. It was an agonizing, stressful hell, but in the end, truth and evidence prevailed. The complaint was officially dismissed as unfounded and strongly suggested to be malicious in intent, a small but significant victory. The financial battle was far more protracted and ugly. He'd been cunning in how he'd hidden and disguised the movement of our joint assets. But the hard drive, his Achilles heel, was my trump card. It contained irrefutable, detailed records of his systematic siphoning of our joint accounts, spreadsheets where he'd even tracked his strategy for asset consolidation. My lawyer gleefully called it a beautifully gift-wrapped smoking gun. It didn't get me all the money back. He'd already managed to lose a chunk of it on some ludicrously high-risk investments he'd bragged about, but it got me enough to secure a modest settlement, enough to find a small, safe apartment of my own, enough to finally, truly breathe. The divorce itself was acrimonious and draining, dragged out unnecessarily by Mark's steadfast refusal to accept any iota of wrongdoing. He painted himself as the ultimate victim, the hardworking, dedicated husband tragically betrayed by an ungrateful, emotionally unstable, and fundamentally lazy wife. He shamelessly tried to use my medically diagnosed burnout and pneumonia against me in court, twisting my illness into supposed evidence of my incompetence and unfitness. But the truth, buttressed by solid evidence and credible testimony, eventually, painstakingly, prevailed. The judge saw through his charade. It's been over a year now since I walked out of that apartment and into an uncertain future. I have my own little place. It's small, sometimes a bit noisy, but it's mine. It's my sanctuary. And it's filled with books, glorious, wonderful books, stacks of fiction and poetry, a testament to my reclaimed freedom. I still work at the hospital, in the pediatric oncology unit that I love, though I've learned hard lessons about setting healthier boundaries, about recognizing my own limits, about prioritizing my own well-being just as fiercely as I advocate for my patients. The persistent cough that plagued me for so long is finally, completely gone. I sleep soundly most nights, a deep, restorative sleep I once thought I'd never experience again. Sometimes, very occasionally, usually when I'm feeling particularly tired or overwhelmed by the demands of a tough shift, his cruel phrase, "You don't deserve rest," will slither into my mind, an unwelcome echo from a dark past. But now, it no longer holds the power of a condemnation. Now, it's a reminder. A stark reminder of how far I've come, of the darkness I navigated. A reminder that rest isn't a luxury or a reward to be earned through ceaseless toil, but a fundamental human need, an inalienable right. My right. I heard through the grapevine, a small, satisfying piece of karmic justice, that Mark's much vaunted freelance career took a significant nosedive. Apparently, word of his manipulative, controlling tendencies and his spectacular lack of judgment somehow got out into his professional circles. He lost that huge, game-changing client he was meeting with the day I left. His meticulously crafted reputation, much like his intricate spreadsheets, crumbled under the weight of his own arrogance. Irony can indeed be a bitter pill, but sometimes, if I'm honest, it's also surprisingly deeply satisfying to watch someone swallow it. I'm still healing, of course. The emotional scars, I'm learning, run much deeper and take far longer to fade than the physical toll his relentless abuse took on my body. Trusting someone again, especially in the context of an intimate relationship, feels like a monumental, terrifying task. The thought of being that vulnerable again makes my stomach clench. But I'm working on it, patiently, compassionately. I have a small, fiercely loyal circle of good friends, a supportive family who were horrified when they finally learned the truth, and an incredibly insightful therapist who is gently guiding me as I unpack the trauma, challenge the negative self-beliefs he instilled, and slowly, painstakingly rebuild my shattered sense of self-worth. The biggest surprise of all, the one I never saw coming in the depths of my despair, finding out just how truly strong I actually am. Not the kind of brittle, performative strength Mark tried to force upon me, that joyless, relentless, soul-crushing productivity, but a deeper, quieter, more resilient strength. The strength to endure unimaginable cruelty, the strength to think clearly under immense pressure, the strength to meticulously plan an escape, the strength to walk away from everything I knew, and ultimately, the strength to heal and rebuild. And I've learned, with every fiber of my being, that I don't just deserve rest. I deserve peace. I deserve joy. I deserve kindness. I deserve to define my own worth, not by an ever-expanding to-do list or a husband's judgmental spreadsheet, but by the compassion I show to others, and more importantly, the compassion I am finally learning to show to myself. The house doesn't shake anymore. I'm building a new one on a much, much stronger foundation. And this time, I am the sole and very happy architect.